Hello and welcome to today's lesson. We're going to be talking about correcting your mistakes. And what I've done is a couple of weeks ago, I asked the community for some sentences. You all responded, and we're going to go through them today and correct some of those mistakes. And of course, I want you to participate in the lesson. So with some of these, I'm going to ask you for, well, your opinion. What do you think? How would you correct some of these sentences? So let's look at the first one. This is, the sentence is, this is a highly flammable or inflammable material. That was really the question. Should we use flammable or inflammable? Please be careful. What I've done is I've added a third one down there right here. This is highly non-flammable material. So one of these sentences has a different meaning than the other two. And I'm guessing that you probably know that the one that I've added is the sentence that's different. And I wanted to add this just so you know, and there's no confusion at all. So let's look at the meaning of these sentences. So both flammable and inflammable have the same meaning. You're referring to something that catches fire and burns easily. If you want to say that it does not catch fire and burn easily, then you're going to use that prefix non, and you're saying something is non-flammable. It's non-flammable material. Now, the question then becomes, well, which one should I use? Really, you could use either one. However, when I go through these lessons or I'm talking in my Speak Up course, I really try to provide a little nuance and let people know, well, I think this is probably the more common word or phrase that you could use. So there's a great resource out there, which is what I wanted to share with you. It's called Google Ngram Viewer. And what it does is on a graph, you can put in words or phrases, and then it graphs out how the frequency that these words are used. Now, this is taken from written English. We're talking about blog posts, academic texts, like just written English, and it plots it on that graph. So in this case, you can see that inflammable used to be a lot more common, but over the years, flammable has become a little more commonly used. So even though you could use either one, it's perfectly okay. I would always tell people, well, maybe just go with the one that's more often used. In this case, flammable. This is highly flammable material, but it is not incorrect to say inflammable. All right, the next one, I hope all of that makes sense. The next sentence, I have done my workshop for improving my consulting skills. So I've corrected the first mistake, right at the beginning, like that I'm going to change it to a. And the reason for that is because in this context, I imagine that it's not my workshop, that I'm running this workshop. I get the feeling that in the sentence they were trying to say they were participating in a workshop. So I changed that pronoun my to a. It's a workshop. And the next part, I want you to tell me what you think. How would you change this? Instead of for improving, what do you think? I have done a workshop, my consulting skills. And there, again, are a couple of different ways that you could rewrite this sentence depending on what you want to say. But whatever you think, let me know. Let me know. Write your answers in the comments, in the chats. It's interactive English. It's all about participating in these lessons. Now, one thing I'll say is when we're talking about a workshop, you may follow it with different prepositions. And let me show you right here. Workshop. Okay. So if you do a workshop for, typically you're going to follow that with someone, for a person. Like I recently did a workshop for new teachers, and that is who the workshop is for. No, excuse me. If you do a workshop on something, then that really is talking about, well, what is the workshop about? What's the content? I recently did a workshop on web design. So the thing that you could put in there, the thing that changes this, I think, is my consulting skills. What would you do? I have done a workshop, my consulting skills. Many of you put to improve. That works. That works. Excellent. Great job, Lolly. English and Saratov. Yes, you. I think you got it to Kayo. Kulai. Perfect. I had actually written, again, in order to put that in there. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with saying I've done a workshop to improve my consulting skills. That's perfectly fine. So again, there's more than one way to write these sentences and capture that idea. In order to, it's the same thing. In this case, you use that phrase in order to do something. It expresses the purpose of something. And that is what I think this person was trying to express, the purpose of this workshop. Great job. Excellent job, everyone. Then we have this one from a member, a beloved member, Rafaela. Nice. Excellent. Actually, I've always had a hard time with causative verbs. Every time I have to use them, I roll the dice. Once again, I've gone ahead and just made some minor corrections with some of the punctuation there, because in this case, you don't really need quotation marks around causative verbs. You could just say, I've had a hard time with causative verbs. And the other thing that instead of using a colon, you'll see on the next slide, but I'm just going to use a full stop or a period. Now, a colon typically is used when you want to emphasize something, or maybe you're creating a list. It's not generally in writing. It's not something that you're going to see all the time if you're reading something, but also probably use as well. So I think we could just keep it simple, put a full stop in there. In that case, you know that every is going to have a capital E. But what about I've? What do you think? Every time I have to use them, I roll the dice. So the thing that I wanted to point out with this is when we're talking about contractions, there are times when you can use contractions, which are very common in spoken English, and other times when you cannot. Generally speaking, I know some people would say, look, writing, it's a more formal way of communication. Try to avoid contractions, and that's fair. I end up using them. It just really depends. If I'm writing something, even a message to all of you, I would use contractions because I feel like it's a little more casual. There's not really a need to be very formal. But excellent. You guys got it. Perfect. Julia, Fabio, nice. So we need to, well, just write, I have to, and we're not going to contract that. And I've given you the rule that you can follow down below, that you can contract have, has, had when they are an auxiliary verb. So in this case, think about the present tense, or the perfect tense, where it's a helping verb. So instead of I have gone, I've gone. We have bought, we've bought. She had been, she'd been. So there are different things. If I'm using it as the main verb, like if I say, I have a pen, and I'm talking about possession in that case, you're not going to contract it when it's the main verb. But I really appreciate you sharing a sentence with us. Excellent. The next one. Okay, so there are a few things that I wanted to point out with this. I think this is a good example. I must be in bed before 9 p.m. Okay? Grammatically, there's nothing wrong. But there are a couple things that I would maybe change or I would suggest that, consider these changes. So let's not go in order. Let's start with before. Instead of before, what other word could you use that in this context, when let's say you're talking about, going to bed, what other word could you use instead of before? And I think in this situation, in my opinion, I think it's a little more commonly used than the other. I realized I think okay, it's fine. I'll correct it. I realized I think I made a little typo, but uh, I'll let you know. So again, if you're thinking about a time, great job, Lali, Takayo, Hana. We're talking about by, and the mistake that I made is that I didn't change it. So, for example, I redid these slides, and I've given you the meaning, but again, I kept before. So that is a mistake. This one is I must be in bed by 9 p.m. So if we're talking about before, we're talking about in advance, right? Sometime before this. By, I'd say, is commonly used in this situation because it's like a deadline that it could be, 1 minute before, 2 minutes before, but you just want to be in bed by this time. You're setting a deadline. So in this situation, I think it's more common to use by. Recently, I rented a car and I was returning the car. The place was going to close at 6 p.m. And I talked to the person about, hey, I'm going to bring it back a little late. And they told me just bring it before 6 p.m. And in that situation, I think it's perfectly fine. They don't want me showing up at the very, very end because they're getting ready to close. So they said, come before 6 p.m. But in this situation, you're talking about getting in bed by. Now, the other word that I highlighted is must. Instead of must, what else could you use? I think it's very common. Again, we're talking about an obligation. There are different modal verbs that you could use. I apologize. I have a little bit of a cough today, so that might not be the last time. Different modal verbs you could use when talking about an obligation, something you must do or something you to do. All right, so the phrase that I'm thinking of, it's a little more informal. I know some of you put like need to. You could use need to, expressing that need. I think more commonly people are just going to say have to. And this one I actually did have by there. So this is the sentence that I would go with. I have to be in bed by 9 p.m. I have to be in bed by 9 o'clock. It's more informal. The other thing I would say is typically if you're going to use must, like I must do something, one slight difference is that when you're using must, sometimes it's like you're making yourself do this. Oh, I must do this. I must buy this. I must do this. And it's like you're telling yourself. If you're using have to, it's like something else is making you do this. So for example, I have to be in bed by 9 o'clock. Why? Because I have to get up early in the morning. So that thing is making me do this. The fact that I have to get up early is making me get up. Or if it's for work, it's making me do something. So you may more often use must when it's something that you're making yourself do, but you're going to use have to when something or someone else is kind of encouraging you or pushing you or making you do something. And generally speaking, if you have a time when you have to be in bed, yeah, there's something else that's causing this, whether it's work or some other personal commitment. So just something to keep in mind. But again, that original sentence, nothing wrong. Let's look at this one right here. And there was nothing grammatically incorrect. Learning English has always been a satisfying journey, but the bumpy learning experience sometimes stunts my growth. I highlighted stunts, or I bolded stunts because I want to change this word. And I'll pass it off to you. What word could you use instead of stunts? And then I'll get into the difference as to why I bolded this word and said, okay, let's change it. So instead of using stunts, what are some other what's another word or words that you could use? There may be others. There's just one in particular that I chose. Gotta get that water for that cough. So the word that I'm thinking of, and I see some other good answers. Sometimes there's still something I would say, keep it simple. Keep it very simple. It's a very simple word that I think, again, you're talking about the bumping experience and somebody, their skills and abilities are growing. But what does it mean? Are you going to grow very fast? Maybe not. In that case, I would use the word, nice, Vidya, slows. Excuse me. So, language learning, yes, it's a bumpy experience. There are highs. Where is it? Make sure my hand's in the frame. And there are lows. In this case, you have that bumpy experience. It's not just a straight shot. There are periods that are possibly going to slow your growth. So I think another, hinders your growth. That would also work. Something hinders. Stops is, it depends on the person. It could happen and it could completely stop. I feel like in this context, probably what this person was trying to talk about was just that they are continuing to grow, but just not as fast as maybe they would like to. And what I want to point out down here is when talking about like stunts, like it is a verb, to stunt. It means to prevent someone or something from reaching its full potential. And the reason why I said I would change this is because when it comes to learning a language, you have that, again, difficult times and times when you're learning a lot. It's not really something that's going to stop you or prevent you from reaching your full potential. In that case, it's just going to slow you down. And to give you another example sentence with stunts, think of, just any sentence like smoking cigarettes at a young age may stunt your growth. So again, if you do something at a young age, maybe it's unhealthy, it's going to prevent you from reaching your full potential as you grow, and it's going to stunt your growth. Now, that is a collocation you will hear, to stunt someone's growth or to stunt your growth. So in this case, again, we're talking about just, not going as fast. But there are other words that you could use besides this. I just thought it would be a good idea to change the word stunts. Excuse me, let me get some more water. So for this one, we'll do a little at a time. And I've just underlined the things that I want to change. The weather is nasty because of the typhoon. And me and my son are kind of under the weather, which means the best day to veg out. Got to do something about this. So let's just start with, I think you can see with some of those underlines, the small ones, there are some punctuation things, but let's start with this. Me and my son, what do you think? What would you change that to, as well as kinda? Let's start with those two. Me and my son are kinda under the weather. And just so you know, under the weather is an idiom that just means that you are sick. Not severely sick, but you're sick. Again, sadly, it's actually gotten better in the last couple of days. Great job, Manuel, Fabio. So the first thing, instead of me and my son, this is going to be a compound sentence, because I told you that first little red line, it's missing a comma. So this is a compound sentence. Compound sentence, you're going to have a subject and a verb. So as a subject, you're going to say my son and I. My son and I. And the reason why you're going to say that instead of I and my son is that when you're writing, grammatically, they're both the same. It's okay, but it is preferred to put yourself last. So if you're listing a group of people, my friend, my father and I, my cat, my dog, my whatever, and I, you're going to put yourself at the end. That is what's preferred in writing. So my son and I, and You could say kind of. Again, what I would say is that when it comes to writing, just avoid some of these reductions. I know what you mean. If you're writing a text message, sure, kinda, it's fine. But as you know, if this is your second language and you're writing something, I would probably just avoid reductions at least writing the reduction. Kind of, or I would avoid gonna, wanna, have to, all of those reductions. However, I actually want to change kind of. And the reason I want to do that is because I think it's more common as a collocation, instead of saying kind of under the weather, to say a little under the weather. And I almost said that. I almost said it when I was talking about the meaning of under the weather. I think it's pretty, you would hear it pretty often if somebody is a little sick. Instead of saying that, they'll say, yeah, I'm a little under the weather. You could say I'm kind of under the weather, sure, but I don't think it's as common as saying I'm a little under the weather. Let's look at the last two parts. So, which means, again, that comma, I'll just go ahead and tell you we're going to get rid of it. So I want to change the best and then something else with that last word, which we'll get into. So we're talking about this typhoon, and my son and I are a little under the weather. So what's the result? Which means we still need a subject. And what I would say is, in this context, I don't know if it's like the best of all others. I had switched this around to just say, like, it's a great day to veg out. The problem with was the spelling. If you're talking about vegging out, it's just an informal phrase which means to relax or take it easy. So instead of like the best day, I would go with something a little more like it's a great day or it's a good day to veg out, instead of using that superlative. Or you could say, yes, Sylvia, it's like the perfect day to veg out in that case. But instead of using a superlative, I think it's a little too strong in saying like this day when there's a typhoon and you're sick is the best of all others. So again, there's different ways that you could reword that second part of the sentence. Let's look at another one. Keep rolling along. And I've done the same thing with this one. I've just underlined the things that I ended up changing. And we're just going to look at that first part together. So let's really just look at that first line. I'll read the sentence. I put short-term goal settings in the next few years that distinguish between academic and formal in English sentences. So let's just look at that first line. I put short-term goal settings in. What would you change that to? And again, I changed this around just interpreting what I think this person was trying to say. So somebody had written in there, okay, we're talking about short-term goals. Yes, when referring to goals, you wouldn't really say short goals or long goals. You need that period of time, term. Short-term goals, long-term goals. The other thing I would say, when you're talking about short-term goals or long-term goals, what verb would you use when talking about those? And it's actually part of the sentence. I just moved it and just changed it to a verb. And I think that's what was a little confusing. Excellent. Julia, Sylvia, English and Saratov. Yes, we're talking about setting short-term goals. The other thing that I would say, and this again, there's no definite period. When I think of a short-term goal, I think of maybe, I don't know, a couple of weeks, a month, 2 months, 3 months, maybe 4 months. But that next part, we're talking about the next few years. So I just changed from short term, I'm just going to change this to long term. And I'm also going to change that preposition in to for. So I set a long-term goal for the next few years. The other thing I did was change goals to goal, because it seems like in that second part of the sentence, we're really just talking about one thing. So I set a long-term goal for the next few years. Okay, that's the period of time. I think a few years is a long time. I don't know if I would consider that a short-term goal. That's just my opinion. The next part. So I set short-term goals for the next few years. What would we do? The goal, instead of that, because again, I put that comma there, you could tell like, okay, we're going to change that to which. Okay, it's going to be that clause, which, and then we're going to need a verb. So we're going to need to extend this sentence out. And the other thing that I would say, academic and formal are adjectives in this case. So there needs to be a noun that follows. So that's why I'm going to kind of shuffle around some of these words. I set a long-term goal for the next few years, which is to distinguish between academic and formal sentences in English. I believe that's maybe what this person was trying to say. But I think there are some things in here that are certainly relevant and I think could be very useful when talking about some of these collocations, like you're setting long-term goals or you're setting short-term goals. And again, you would set a goal for a period of time, for a few years, for a couple of weeks, for a few months. So I set a long-term goal for the next few years, which is to distinguish between academic and formal sentences in English. Excellent. Then I've done the same thing. Again, I've just given you the things that I would change, and I'm going to put the question off to you. What do you think? So again, those small little lines right there, those are punctuation. So I have an important exam next Tuesday, full stop or period, either one. So I'll go ahead and tell you that because just generally, I'll read the sentence as is. I have an important exam next Tuesday. I'm kind of nervous, but I truly believe that everything is going to be well because I really did my best. It's a long sentence. It's a run-on sentence, so that's why I would put a period or full stop after Tuesday. So I have an important exam on Tuesday. Full stop. I'm kinda. There it is, that kinda again. So as I just said before, I would not recommend using these reductions when you're writing. And instead of, you could say I'm kind of nervous. That's perfectly fine. I think it's a little more informal in that you may hear somebody say in spoken English. I think it's more common to use another phrase. Instead of kind of, what else could you say? What do you think? And again, there's another, see, I'm a bit nervous. That works as well. What I had put, I want to make sure I don't get ahead of myself. All right, is I'm a little nervous, but I'm a bit nervous. I'm a little nervous. You could say somebody says I'm somewhat nervous. Sure. I don't know why I like to use a little when I just mentioned. I changed the other kind of to a little under the weather. In this, I would say I'm a little nervous. Comma, because this is going to be a compound sentence, but I truly believe that instead of everything, when you're talking about all individual things, in this context, you're going to use that pronoun everything, one word, just referring to all the things together. So I truly believe that everything is going to be, oh gosh, I think I didn't move that line over. That red line should be under will. Instead of will, what would you change it to? And then that other part of the sentence, again, how would you reword that part of the sentence? And I would ask you to keep in mind the verb tense. So I'm rather nervous. That works. I would say instead of everything's going to be well, because in this situation, well is an adverb. You probably want to use an adjective. How is everything going to be? And I think there are two common words when somebody says everything's going to be what? What are some words? What are a couple of words that people would use? I think you hear this in songs quite often when they talk about everything's gonna be what? And that's what I was trying to use. So I'll tell you that instead of well, I think you could say everything's going to be okay or everything's going to be all right. There are probably other words that you could also use, but I think those are common ones that you would hear when somebody's sitting there telling you, or maybe you're telling someone else, like, don't worry, everything's going to be okay, or don't worry, everything's going to be all right. And there are many songs out there, everything is going to be all right, that you could find. So everything's going to be all right because, so this is where I was a little confused. We're talking about the future. I have an important exam next Tuesday. Okay. I'm a little nervous, but I truly believe everything's going to be all right. So in this case, it said because I did my best. I guess I was a little confused because now it's talking about the past. So in this situation, I would still think that you are going to study for the exam. You're going to prepare for the exam between now and Tuesday. So in that case, I would still keep it the future and say everything is going to be all right because I will do my best or I will try my best, and just keep it in the future. But that was the part that I was confused with at the end there as far as those verb tenses go. But I think you guys did a really great job correcting some of these sentences and going through, providing your answers. That's what it's all about, just kind of getting that practice. If you enjoyed this lesson, let me know. Hit that like button. I'll continue doing more. Also, if you would like the lesson notes, if you want to get the lesson notes, join our email community. You can click on the link down in the description, and I will send them to you. Or again, if you're already a part of the email community, check your email. I have already sent them, and you will find them in your inbox. But just to put them in the chat right now, if you'd like to get a PDF copy of the lesson, you can click that link right there, join our email community, access these notes. And again, some of this is out of context, so these are the ways that I interpreted what these people were trying to say and kind of what they were going to express. But thank you so much for joining me. Go Powell, excellent. I love seeing some members in here. Vicky, Gustav, great to see you guys. Lolly, great to see you. Also, people from Speak Up, Sylvia, Takayo, thank you guys for being here. Sylvia, I'll talk to you real soon. And Falco, Julia, Conchi, just trying to get some last minute shout outs in here. Manuel, thank you. Hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful day. And I will be back before you know it with another lesson.